Hi, thank you very much. I'd like to say thank you very much for inviting me to speak with you today. As the college says, I'm going to talk to you about the St George's experience of using mobile devices for self-assessment in medical education. And a lot of this will actually fit in very well with what Daniel has already spoken to you about. It's almost a case study for some of the concepts that he was talking about. And I'll talk to you about our experiences of PBL, how we use it for virtual patients, how we use it in other ways as well, and also how we've tried to use mobile devices.
Sorry, I interrupt you. Do you hear the mic? Is the microphone on?
Is this better?
Is it okay?
If I hold it a bit closer. Okay.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. So I will talk to you a little bit about some of the stuff that Daniel has mentioned and our experiences at St George's. So, as Daniel said, problem-based learning, it's a very big part of the teaching that we do at St George's. I won't dwell on it too much because Daniel's covered it pretty in depth, but it's very similar to as he says. What you saw there was a picture of a problem-based learning class. They have a small group, around 8 students, and they run through a patient scenario that's facilitated by a tutor. So it's important they have a member of staff there sort of guiding them through without telling them the answers, working through a scenario, them playing the role of a clinician. And the way they learn is through discussion with each other, with the tutor, looking at trying to work their way through the case. Now, we at St George's wanted to move this on a little and use technology to enhance this process. So what we wanted was a scenario. We wanted the ability for the students to take decisions, to explore the consequences of those decisions, and to get feedback. But we didn't just want to take the PBL online, we wanted it to add something to the experience that the students were getting. And that was virtual patients allowed us to do that. Daniel's mentioned this already, but to give you a brief quote to summarise them. Virtual patients are an interactive computer simulation of real-life clinical scenarios for the purpose of medical and healthcare training, education or assessment. So it's a broad definition and there's various different models. The ones that we use at St George's mostly are like the ones that Daniel mentioned for Open Labyrinth. They're branching cases, they're online and they're web-based using that system. And this is an example of a PBL now with the online virtual patient. So you can see the difference from the previous picture. We have a screen and a computer hooked up to that shows the patient on screen. Now you may see also there are decorations in this. I can assure you that's not, Daniel's was at Christmas, this was at Halloween. It's purely a coincidence. It's not a crucial part of the PBL experience to decorate the rooms. And to demonstrate, this is, as Daniel was talking, the branching virtual patient. This is what they offer. So what you can see here is a linear, what would be a paper-based virtual patient. Each node on this graph represents a part of the case. The students read that, they discuss it. But what the paper-based cases don't give the students is the chance to make decisions, to explore the options available to them and the consequences of those options. So this is what a linear case looks like. This is what a online Open Labyrinth or Decision Sim case looks like. So you can see students are able to make choices here. They're able to go off on a different track, explore different options, different consequences of those options, discuss those and explore the case like that. So it's a very flexible model for exploring the clinical reasoning, the clinical decision making that students would have to make in practice. Virtual patients, just a few strengths that they have. They're simple tools. Ultimately, there's nothing particularly technologically advanced about them in their basic form. They can be text-based. They are easy to author. Quite often with virtual patient platforms, the authoring tools are built in, so you don't even need a technologist to do it. A teacher, a clinician can do it directly without involving anybody you don't need to do any programming or anything like that. And as a consequence, they're very flexible. This simplicity and this ease of authoring means they're very flexible. Daniel showed you a number of pages from a virtual patient that was text-based. I'm going to show you in a second one that is exactly the same sort of technological basis, but we've got videos in, similar to some of the stuff that you've seen before. And you can also use them on multiple platforms, multiple ways of doing them, and also in different contexts as well. I mean, I haven't got a slide to illustrate this particularly, but as was discussed before, the need for this sort of technology not to replace contact time with students. They can be used for self-directed learning, but they can be used in the context of PBL as well. So you have a tutor there present, and it's contact time. You can use them in a lecture, for instance. And I'm going to show an example in a second that was used in a lecture environment with students taking a vote on the decisions to make. And that's very helpful, because what they do is they prepare you for real-life patient encounters without any danger of, if you make a mistake, it doesn't harm a real-life patient. You can make mistakes in virtual patients, and it prepares you for real life in a sort of no consequences environment. Virtual patients, they also provide feedback to students, either instant or delayed, depending on the different way that the case is written, and I'll show you a few examples of that. But first of all, I want to give you a chance to see just one decision point from one of our patients. Now, as I mentioned, this was an example of an ethics virtual patient that was used in a lecture. So the tutor, the lecturer was standing at the front of the class and would play a video to the students, and then ask them to vote what to do. They would discuss the options in the lecture and work with it like that. So I'll give you the background to the patient before we see the videos. This patient is 79 years old. He has severe chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which I don't say lightly because, as I may not have mentioned, I'm not a medic, so actually I don't really know what chronic obstructive pulmonary disease is, but I have memorised it just for your benefit. They've performed a capacity assessment, and he's no capacity to make the DNAR decision. DNAR being do not attempt resuscitation. So the doctor is speaking to the next of kin about what to do in this scenario. They want to know whether they can make the decision about whether to resuscitate or not, if the time should come, and want students to explore the ethics around that situation. So if I go to the next page, and we have a short extract of video here. If I can ask Martin to click on the video, you'll see the patient.
I spoke to your father earlier, and I believe he doesn't have capacity to make decisions for himself.
Yes, I know. He's very confused right now.
As you probably know, he's very ill.
Yes. Look, I know there's a chance he might not make it. I'm medically trained, you know. I know he may go into cardiopulmonary arrest, and if that happens, please don't resuscitate him. He wouldn't want it. He really wouldn't.
Did your father speak to you about this?
Well, I remember 3 years ago, I think it was, last time I was here, watching some documentary on euthanasia with him. And we saw this guy on the TV gasping for breath with tubes everywhere, and my father said he would never want to live disabled. I know what it's like resuscitating somebody. You jump on his chest, break some ribs, break his dignity too. Please, just let him go.
So that covers the information that the students are given in this situation. They've seen that the son wants this is the son of the patient. He wants them not to write he wants them to write the do not attempt to resuscitate order. He feels that his father wouldn't have wanted this, and based on his own medical background, he feels that would be the right decision. So the students, in the role of the doctor, are asked what to do in this situation. Do they agree to the son's wishes and write the do not attempt to resuscitate order? or do they wait? Do they not write it at this moment in time? So just out of interest, I'm going to ask you guys to suggest, just with a show of hands, who would write the DNAR order in this situation? Just briefly, see if this works. Would anybody write it in this situation? Just pop up your hand. So we've got one brave man that would. Okay. Would anybody not write it in the situation? Interesting. So that's the more popular option. So what we'll do, we'll have a look now and see what would have happened if in each situation, depending on what decision you made. So if Martin could click on the one on the left, which is to write the order.
I will write the DNAR order, and I'll let the rest of the medical team know.
Thank you, Doctor. I really appreciate your help.
So that's the immediate response if they wrote the DNAR order. Now if we click on the other video, we'll see what happens if the doctor chooses not to write it.
Look, Mr. Dufresne, as I've said, I believe we should wait. We should see how he gets on before we write the DNAR order.
Well, what if you arrest today?
It's unlikely. I feel it's too early to write the order.
Too early? Well, let's just wait until he dies and then write it. This is disgraceful.
Mr.
It's
Dufresne.
disgraceful.
Okay, so we can see the immediate response to that situation is that if you don't write the DNAR order, the son of the patient is rather angry and very unhappy about it. But at this point, you don't know for sure what the right decision was. You don't know what the consequences of that option are. I mean, it seems immediately that perhaps you've made the wrong choice because you've upset the son if you say, do not write. And in fact, as you go through the case, you don't know whether the consequences of your actions at that point. One of the benefits that virtual patients can do in mimicking real-life scenarios is that the feedback that the students can receive can be delayed, much as it would be in real life. And you don't actually find out till later that by not writing the DNAR order, that the majority of you were correct, that wasn't the right decision. If you write the DNAR order, it turns out that the son has, that the patient actually had express wishes registered with his GP and you made a mistake. So in this case, you would have been right, but you wouldn't have known that for a while. So well done, everyone. That's just an example. That's just an example of one decision point in a VP that we use in a lecture scenario. What I'm going to talk to you more about is what we've done with those now and our experiences with using them and taking them to mobile devices. The basis for a lot of this work started with our Generation 4 project, which was to take our existing PBL curriculum and make it more interactive and personalised, replacing paper-based patients with these online virtual patients. So the curriculum, which takes place in the transitional year, so students have already learned the basic science and they're not quite, then it's the year before they go out on clinical placements. So the goal of this curriculum, this problem-based learning curriculum at this stage, is to take their basic knowledge of the science and prepare them for their real-life placements. So we introduced 18 of these virtual patient cases, but we supplemented that with 36 formative assessments based around the same model, online virtual patients, that allowed students to supplement their the learning that happened in the PBL curriculum. These were optional, they were delivered on the web, and they were related to the PBL case themselves to try and broaden student exposure to the learning objectives that were occurring. In many instances, students were concentrating on the particular case rather than the broader objectives behind it. And we wanted to broaden that experience and give them more chance to apply the knowledge rather than just focus on one case. However, we did this for a year or two, in fact, and the challenge we had was that students weren't using them. The uptake of these cases that were available through the VLE that they log onto regularly, the uptake, because they were optional, was very low. I think it was around 5% of students would actually do them on a regular basis. And we wanted to find a way of addressing that. Meanwhile, each year at St George's we do a survey with our students to discuss mobile devices and to try and understand how our students use them. We want to know what platforms and what devices they use, what features and functionality they use with their devices, what they use it for. And we were doing that, and each January, I think since 2010, and this is just one example of the question. Now it's slightly misleading because of the way that the survey took shape over a number of years and the way the mobile market changed. But we were looking at this to see what mobiles our students used, and you can see clearly that Apple, as the second from the left device, was the most popular by 2012. It increased. What's not so clear is the use of Android devices as the other major platform, which is made up from Samsung, HTC, and a couple of other platforms. But ultimately, what became fairly clear was that we had a solid 40% of students were on Apple devices, and that there was a trend for increasing use of smartphones. So what we decided to do was to take the assessment VP cases and put them onto a mobile device to see if that would encourage the student uptake, to try and get students to use them in a self-directed learning way, in a way that fitted their lifestyle. One particular thing we were looking at, for instance, is working in London, students all travel to the university on the tube, and we thought maybe we can allow them to harness their time on the tube to play these cases. So we decided to take the cases onto a mobile device. At that stage we had a decision to make, and that's the first challenge, the key challenge that we faced that I'm going to mention, which was to choose a development platform, this is a big decision when it comes to mobile devices. We're very used to using the web for an awful lot of things, for desktop and laptop computers. Windows is fairly standard, the web is accessible on other platforms as well, so you have that available, but that doesn't necessarily stand true for mobile devices. As educators, we have to ensure that the resources reach all the student population. Some students aren't disadvantaged, but when developing for mobile devices, we have limited resources, time, money, expertise, and it's impossible where there's competing platforms such as Apple, Android, BlackBerry. We're unable to develop for all those platforms simultaneously. They all have specialist skills, specialist knowledge required to do it, and it's not as easy as it was when it was just creating the desktop web. So you have a decision to make. You have to choose whether to go for a native app or a web app, and also, if you're going native, what platform to target first. Native apps, the pros, you have the best performance. Your experience is tailored for the device. You can use all the features of the device, the camera, the accelerometer. The downside is you have to develop for all the platforms separately, no reuse of it. You can't reuse the effort from developing from one platform to another. And it requires specialist expertise that many of us in educational technology don't have at the moment. We can develop for the web, but we don't necessarily know how to develop for mobile platforms. So there's a trade-off there. The alternative is web apps. There's many frameworks available to help you with this, and the pros are the same as those of the desktop web. You can write once, you can deploy it everywhere. So you can write a web app that will run on an Apple device, it will run on an Android device. But you have to, and you can use your existing development expertise to do that. However, there are cons to this. It may be slightly slower, less of a good experience than you might want from the device, and it's also difficult to provide some functionality, such as, it's not impossible, but functionality such as using it offline is not so easy with web apps, and that was something we wanted very critically. There's a third option, which isn't something that we took at the time because it's a comparatively recent development, but it's worth mentioning, which is to allow web apps to be packaged up as native apps using tools such as PhoneGap. These combine some of the pros of the native apps and the web apps. You can write once, deploy them to many platforms. and they provide some of the APIs to access the device functionality, but their performance is still a little bit less than that of native apps, and it can be complex to provide some of the functionalities that may be easier with native apps. So to this challenge, there's no answer, and I think it really does depend what you're trying to achieve, really, what your needs and requirements are. You have to prioritise. What we went for, in the end, was a staggered release of native apps, and we developed this tool, MedAssess, which is the tool that we developed for our students. MedAssess was a version of a virtual patient player, following the same model as Open Labyrinth and Decision Sim that we developed for mobile devices, for Apple devices initially, and made that available to our students for free through the VLE. It was introduced in September 2011, and it provided the same assessment cases that we previously provided on the web, but through a mobile application. We also made a version available in the Apple App Store, which was available to the public as well. I'm going to talk to you more about MedAssess, the internal version, here today. As I say, it was initially made available for Apple devices because we only had the resources to target one's family of devices at the time. Later on, a year later in fact, we've made a version available for Android as well. The cases can be downloaded and played offline, so crucially we've hit our goal of allowing students to play these self-assessment cases on the tube. And it's just a few screenshots of the app. You can include videos in it, you can include pictures in it, as you see there. And this is a screenshot of the Android version, so it is available for both platforms. And as I mentioned, these cases were designed for formative self-assessment from students. So they're using these for self-directed learning. And there's various features and various models we were able to do through the application. The first one that you see here is, although it's a branching virtual patient, this one is fairly linear, and this essentially takes the form of a multiple choice quiz. You have a series of nodes that give you questions. They can be based on text, they can be based on images, there can be a number of answers. In this instance, we've got a question that is true or false. The students select the answer, and they receive instant feedback based on their answers. So you can see if you choose false, you get the information for that. If you choose true, you get the information for that. So it's a very instant way, fairly traditional way of providing MCQs to students in that manner. You also have inquiry questions, which are similar to MCQs but permit multiple correct answers. These provide instant feedback in the same way here. You see that the feedback's appearing at the base of the page there. They don't prevent further progress, but they affect the learner's score. And you can see, if I can go back, in fact, you can see in the top right-hand corner, there is a scoring mechanism as well for these cases. So on the left-hand side, the student's got 5 points in total because they've got the answer wrong. They've got an extra 5 points on the right-hand side because they've got the answer right. So there are mechanisms for measuring and tracking that as well. You can also start to take advantage of the branching functionality as an assessment feature. And this is what you see here on the screen. This is a map of a virtual patient, one of the virtual patient assessment cases. Now you can see, you can take various paths down this. If you take this top path, so you can see where the red line is, you can see the route you take through the case, and when you reach the last node, you receive the following feedback. It knows that in the early part of the case, you correctly recognise that Mr. O'Connor did not require a CT scan, and it recognises throughout the various things that you saw, that you correctly chose and didn't choose, and things like that. It gives you customised feedback based on that. In contrast, if you take the other route, another route, which is the route down here, represented by the red line, you can see you get different feedback. So to contrast and compare, in this one it knows that you didn't request the CT scan, in fact no, that you did request the CT scan. but you did recognise that he needed further assessment. So you can tailor the feedback at the end of the case. It's delayed till the end if that's the way you design it, but it gives you an option for students getting feedback based on the decisions that they've made. So there's a number of models that the application allows us to do for training for these cases. And the students get feedback at the end as well. They're told it's the end of the case, they're given a score based on the answers that they're given and the choices that they've made. And they're also able to compare a whole list of their scores throughout the various cases that they've played. So that was our project to take the virtual patient assessment cases that we provided on the web onto a mobile device. And that's how we achieved it from a practical sense and some of the designs that they took. But we still had a challenge because the virtual patients cases were on the web initially. We had the system for playing them on the mobile device, but we didn't have any data in there. And there was no authoring system for this case on the mobile device. So we had a challenge for how to do that. How to take it from the web to the mobile. And we had to tackle that challenge. And the way to do it, as Daniel mentioned before, was through data standards. And in particular, the MEFANET data standard. Just to give you a little background on MEFANET, it's an international group of healthcare associations. It's based at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore. And the goal for the organisation is to advance healthcare education through technology standards. They have a number of standards, as you can see there, and with a reference to their website. But the particular one that we used is the MEFANET Virtual Patient Standard, which was developed basically alongside this whole process of branching virtual patients. And I won't go into this too much because Daniel's already covered it very well, but it's an XML-based standard for transferring cases from one system to another, it's very flexible. It allows you to do all the various different models of virtual patients that are around. And we made use of it for this purpose, of getting our cases into our mobile application. And we did it by creating a custom tool, fairly simply, fairly ugly. This isn't to be exposed to teachers particularly, but this was our interim step. We exported the case from our web-based platform, put it into this tool, which basically lays out the data line by line, and then imports it into our database for our mobile application for putting on the devices. So data standards allowed us to meet that challenge. Although we didn't have an authoring system directly for the mobile application, we were able to move the data into it. So, what was the effect of this, of the mobile application and our experience with this? We gathered feedback from the students using an online survey, using SurveyMonkey. And overall, we got very good feedback. The results were very positive after the first year. Based on the mobile survey that we do in every January, 320 students have iOS devices. There are, in the transition year that we were using the assessment cases, there are 180 odd students. So that's the sort of numbers that we were talking. And we found the uptake of the application, the number of students that downloaded it, was 97. So a fairly significant chunk actually actively downloaded the application. When compared with the previous usage of the assessment cases, which was very low, this was a huge leap. Overall, the app was scored very highly by them when we gathered feedback on it, 8 out of 10, and they rated it as very simple to use and agreed that the content was useful. Just a little bit more of a breakdown here. Most of the feedback came through that it was very easy. The only one that didn't was getting support for the app. Now, we don't know exactly why, but generally we didn't receive any support requests, so it seems that there wasn't really much support required, which is why nothing's come up too positive on that one. But generally all the key functionality was felt to be very accessible and easily accessed. And we asked the students where and when they used the app, and the answers were very pleasing. As I say, one of the key things was we thought, sitting on the tube, you've got the cases offline, you don't need to be connected to the web to do it, will they do it there? And it turns out they did. 60% used it when travelling, 60% used it in their spare time, and spare time at home. So that indicates to us that this was an effective way of delivering the content to them. These cases they were able to use when they had some free time to use. It made the cases more accessible, more available, delivered it to students in the way that they want to use it, rather than forcing them to go to a desktop computer in that paradigm when it's not actually necessary for the task in hand. It gives it to them in as lightweight a way as possible. Fortunately, none of the students used the app in lectures, which is good, although they may just have been telling us what they wanted us to hear. I couldn't possibly guarantee that one. And we had some additional comments here. They wanted to compare their scores with others, which is more functionality that we might introduce in the future. They wanted more cases, they found it interesting and educational. So generally the feedback was very good. What next? Well, we want to see how that was after the first year of using these cases on mobile devices. We're now sort of hitting the second year, and what we're looking to do at the end of this year is to see how things progress, see how things have developed. As I mentioned, we made the cases available on the Android platform as well in September, so we want to see how that affects uptake in the second year. See if more students use it because of the choice of platform. We also want to see how the increased impact of devices such as tablets has affected things. They're becoming increasingly prominent and affordable as resources, and we want to see if that affects it too, because these cases can be played on those devices as well. And also just the results from the second year, increased exposure to for the students, word of mouth. Will it become more popular and more widely used as a result of that? And also as a result of these experiences and the success of this, we've been encouraged to look more into delivering learning on mobile devices rather than the web as we'd focused on before. We've been provided with funding by the university to create an app centre, a centralised way of pooling the experience for developing resources for these devices, and we currently have a number of projects underway to look at that. We have an authoring app for these virtual patients that will allow us to actually directly create the case maps that you saw that were previously created on the web, and without having to import them into the app for them to be published to it directly. So that will smooth the workflow for creating more content in this way. We also have a number of apps to use, the genetics counselling app, one to be used by geneticists with patient consultations, displaying a series of explanatory animations there. And also Revised Psych, which is a website created by a student at St George's for psychology revision. And we want to make that same resource available on mobile devices, so students can use that sort of in the way that they want, in the same way that was worked for the virtual patients. So that's where we're heading, really, and I think that pretty much covers anything I had to say to you. So really, if there are any questions or anything else you'd like to add to it, for me to add, really.
Thank you very much for a very interesting communication. It's open for discussion now. Yes?
Thanks, Luke, for the wonderful lecture about the game-based learning experiences of your students at St. George's. And I, and also many others, would be probably interested, what are the feelings and approach of the teachers, of the medical teachers and clinical experts to the word technology-enhanced learning and mobile devices in medical education? Do they have some kind of fears, or do they feel in danger when they hear technology-enhanced learning?
I think that's undoubtedly true that they do, and they certainly have in the past. I think that there is always a fear, and it's not just the teachers; it's the students as well. And that this is something that you can probably express quite strongly in a lot of the projects that we've done with technology enhanced learning. A lot of the feedback that we've had from students has been, we like it, but we don't want you to replace contact time or teaching time with this stuff. And that's absolutely right. I don't think anybody wants to do that. And I think that has been a fear from some. But much of the focus of the work that we've done has not been on self-directed learning in the past. It's been on using them in teaching sessions and disseminating the way that they're used to the teachers. And also we've had key teaching staff on board with us from the very start that really support the processes, really believe in it, and have helped us to persuade others of the benefits of it. So, and I think that just the knowledge of that is increasing, the knowledge and the awareness, and also the move to mobile devices has glamorised it as well. You know, people like these devices, and teachers actually own these devices, and they can see the value that it's had for them, and it makes the technology very accessible. And so by making it accessible to the teachers as well, they can see the benefits for the students much more clearly than perhaps they could with the desktop. So I think from that point of view, it's seen as less of a threat than it ever was, really, and much more complementary to the educational experience.
Okay, thanks, this is nice to hear. And one more comment. So if I understand it well, you don't replace the contact time with these mobile learning experiences.
Absolutely, yeah.
Something additional.
It is. It's all the PBL curriculum is still contact time. You have tutors involved there. Where we've taken that online, it's merely replacing the paper-based cases that we had with tutors. The tutors were there in the rooms with the students with the paper. The same tutors are still there in the rooms with them with the online problem-based learning. The assessment cases, those are self-directed, but they are supplementary. They're voluntary. They don't have a dedicated time allotted to them. They are there for the students to use if they want. Now, as we've seen in our results, that they didn't want when it was on the desktop PC, when they had to sit in front of a desktop PC. But by putting them on mobile devices, we've encouraged them to make good use of their free time by playing these cases at their leisure, basically in the way that they want, and that's encouraged the uptake. So they are entirely supplementary to the curriculum, to the talk curriculum, but their usage has been encouraged as well. They're voluntary, but we're finding ways to get the students to actually take advantage of that and use them in that way.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Thank you for an interesting presentation. I appreciate very much that you make the students thinking, not only memorizing, but I would like for some practical information. How much time is needed to prepare one case, and how many people and what specialties are needed to prepare it?
Sorry, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sorry?
Can you introduce?
My name is Kozlikova. I'm from medical faculty of Bratislava.
Hi. Yes, there's the time to develop one of these cases, and it varies depending upon the platform that you're using and the capabilities of the software that you're using. In the past, virtual patients have been quite lengthy to create in some respects from a technological point of view, but now the systems are slicker, the workflows are improving, so you can very easily get from authoring a case to delivering it quite quickly. I think generally the advice we offer is that for a clinician it can take maybe 10 to 20 hours if they're not experienced to deliver a case to create a case on the web. As you get more used to it, one of my colleagues, Dr. Jonathan Round, who's a paediatrician, and works very closely with us in the educational technology. He actually, I remember last year, did a presentation in the United States in which he created a virtual patient on the flight over to the United States on his laptop. He created the virtual patient on the flight and then presented it at the conference. So for him, who's made a number of these cases, it's very quick, and he did it in 4 hours. In terms of the expertise that you need, essentially, once you know how to use the system, which is very simple, it's a fairly standard web application for those virtual patients on the web. All you really need is your own clinical knowledge. If you're writing a case to teach an area in which you are an expert, you really don't need anybody else. You certainly don't need a technologist to help you with these virtual patient publishing platforms. With the mobile device at the moment, they do need a technologist to import the case, but as I say, we are working on an authoring application that will again remove the need for a technologist from that process. So from that point of view, the expertise is really yourself, providing you know the subject matter. That's all you need.
Thank you. Next one. Okay.
I would also like to say thank you for an excellent presentation, because it was an excellent example how to transport the content to students and to fulfill the leisure time of students. For workaholics like me, it's a good message that it works. But I would like to ask you about the strategy or organization of teaching in the St. George Medical School. Is it completely based on problem-based learning, or is there some balance between problem-based learning hours and standard contact, let's say hierarchically oriented teaching, and what is the strategy you adopted to implement this gamification?
There is a balance. As I mentioned, the cases that we deliver are predominantly delivered in what we call a transition year, which is, depending on the course you're on, is either in the 2nd or 3rd year. So in the 1st year or 2 years, depending on the course, you are taught through a series of lectures and tutorials and that sort of standard methods. They do have a sort of a lighter weight version of problem-based learning in those years called case-based learning, which is rather more structured than the problem-based learning, which is very much open discussion. So the basic science, the basic knowledge is taught in quite traditional ways in some respects. And then in the transition year, they're asked to apply this knowledge that they've built up to these problem-based learning cases. To start learning how to apply the knowledge and to prepare them for the following year when they go on to clinical placements and work with clinicians and work in a real life hospital environment. So there is a balance there, and even in the transition year they do have supplementary lectures on the learning topics of the week as well. So it forms part of the curriculum, but the problem-based learning does cover the whole curriculum in that time, in that year. It covers the whole range of learning objectives, and I believe that's sort of the primary method in that transition year, but it's balanced with more traditional contact in the earlier years of the course.
Thank you.